Don't touch that. Mark's voice cut through the silence like a blade. His hand slammed down on the mahogany drawer so hard the entire desk shook. I froze, my fingers inches from the brass handle. The drawer had my initials carved into it. D.W. Danielle Walsh. My father had shown it to me when I was 12 years old, told me it would be mine someday. Now Mark stood between me and that promise, his face twisted with something I had never seen before. Fear. The room fell silent. Our aunts and uncles stopped their quiet conversations. My cousin Tyler paused mid-reach for another sandwich. Everyone turned to watch as Mark grabbed my wrist and pulled my hand away from the drawer. Dad left everything to me, he announced loudly, his grip tightening. You have no right to anything in this house. My face burned with humiliation. 23 relatives witnessed my brother treating me like a thief in our father's home. Nobody said a word. Nobody defended me. I pulled my hand free and stepped back, my heart pounding. Mark quickly locked the drawer with a small key and slipped it into his pocket. His eyes never left mine, and in that moment I saw something that terrified me. Why was he so afraid of what I might find? My name is Danielle Walsh. I am 31 years old, from Portland, Oregon. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to my channel for more fascinating stories like this. I drove home from Dad's house that evening replaying the scene over and over. Mark was always the golden son. While I worked 2 jobs to put myself through nursing school, Mark got his MBA paid for by our parents. While I stayed up nights helping Dad through his cancer treatments, Mark sent occasional text messages asking for updates. He lived 3 hours away in Seattle and claimed his demanding job at a consulting firm kept him too busy for regular visits. But somehow, he still managed to position himself as the responsible heir. He rewrote our family history in subtle ways. At Dad's funeral, Mark told everyone how he had been Dad's primary caretaker. He talked about difficult decisions he made and sacrifices he endured. People nodded sympathetically while I stood there in shock. I had taken a leave of absence from the hospital. I had moved into Dad's guest room for the final 6 months. I held his hand through every treatment, every setback, every midnight panic. But Mark told a different story, and people believed him. During the reception afterward, my cousin Bethany pulled me aside. Something is not right, she whispered. Mark has been lying about a lot of things. The call came 3 days after the funeral. Miss Walsh, this is Arthur Brennan. I was your father's attorney for 27 years. His voice was gentle but firm. I need to speak with you about some concerns regarding the estate distribution. My hands trembled as I gripped the phone. What kind of concerns? Your brother filed probate paperwork last week. According to his inventory, several items specifically designated for you are listed as either non-existent or already distributed to him, including a locked drawer bearing your initials. My breath caught. He told everyone Dad left everything to him. That is not accurate, Mr. Brennan said carefully. Your father's will contains very specific instructions. Certain personal items were designated for you by name. Mark, as executor, was obligated to inform you and distribute them accordingly. He has not done so. The room spun. Mark had lied. Not just to me, but legally. Officially. What do I do? Come to my office tomorrow. I have documents that might interest you. I barely slept that night. My mind raced through possibilities. What was in that drawer? Why did Mark fight so hard to keep me from it? What else had he hidden? Mr. Brennan's office smelled like old books and leather. He spread several papers across his desk, each one marked with colored tabs. This is your father's will, signed 18 months ago. And this, he tapped a separate document, is a handwritten addendum executed 6 months before his death. I leaned forward. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably Dad's. My throat tightened as I read the words. The locked drawer in my study, marked with Danielle's initials, contains items meant solely for her. Under no circumstances should these be withheld. My hands shook as I held the paper. Mark never mentioned this. No, Mr. Brennan said quietly. He submitted probate documents claiming no such specification existed. But that is fraud. Yes. The word hung between us like a stone. My brother, the golden son, had committed legal fraud. He had looked me in the eye, grabbed my wrist, humiliated me in front of our entire family, and lied. All to keep me from that drawer. Why has probate not caught this? I asked. Mark filed in a different county than where your father resided. It is unusual but not illegal. However, it does make oversight more difficult. The court assigned to his filing would not have access to your father's original documents unless someone specifically brought them forward. I spent the next week quietly gathering evidence. Mr. Brennan gave me copies of everything. I requested records from the hospital where Dad received treatment. I collected bank statements from the joint account I had shared with Dad for medical expenses. Every document told the same story. I had been there. Mark had not. But Mark's version of events was the one everyone believed. I found more inconsistencies as I dug deeper. Dad's vintage watch collection had been valued at $42,000 in his estate planning documents. Mark's probate filing listed it at $8,000. 3 paintings that hung in Dad's study were missing from the inventory entirely. A savings account containing $15,000 showed a withdrawal 2 weeks before Dad died. The signature looked like Dad's, but the handwriting was steadier than it should have been. Dad's hands shook badly near the end. I photographed everything. I created a spreadsheet tracking discrepancies. And I realized something that made my blood run cold. Mark had not just hidden things from me. He had been systematically looting our father's estate while Dad was too sick to notice. The question was, how deep did this go? And how long had it been happening? The hospital billing department sent me records showing 2 years of payments. Every invoice, every procedure, every medication. My name appeared on 87% of them. Mark's name appeared twice. 2 payments out of hundreds. Yet at the funeral, he had stood before everyone and talked about the financial burden he carried. He spoke about difficult choices and personal sacrifice. People had hugged him and told him he was a good son. I had paid for Dad's medications when insurance denied coverage. I had negotiated payment plans for treatments. I had worked extra shifts to cover costs that Medicaid would not touch. My savings account, once healthy, was now nearly empty. And Mark had taken credit for all of it. I arranged the receipts in chronological order and photographed each one. These documents contradicted everything Mark told our family. They proved he had built his reputation on lies. But I needed to be smart about this. Mark was 3 years older, 6 inches taller, and had always been better at controlling narratives. If I confronted him directly, he would twist everything. He would make me look bitter or jealous or unstable. I needed him to expose himself. So I decided to do something that went against every instinct. I decided to pretend I believed him. I called Mark the next morning. My voice shook, but I forced myself to sound defeated. I am sorry about the other day, I said. I should not have tried to open that drawer. You are right. You were the executor. I should respect Dad's wishes. Silence on the other end. Then Mark's voice, cautious but pleased. I appreciate you saying that, Danny. I know this has been hard on both of us. Can we meet for coffee? I want to apologize properly. We met at a cafe downtown. Mark arrived 15 minutes late, which was typical. He ordered an expensive latte and settled into his chair with the satisfied air of someone who had won an argument. I am glad you called, he said. Families should not fight over material things. You are right, I agreed, swallowing my anger. Tell me about being executor. It must have been so much work. His face lit up. For the next 40 minutes, Mark talked. He talked about managing assets and making tough calls and handling Dad's affairs with wisdom beyond his years. He casually mentioned reorganizing Dad's files before probate. He laughed about streamlining the estate to avoid complications. And with every word, he revealed more than he realized. He was admitting to document manipulation. He was confessing to unauthorized changes. He just did not know I was paying attention. The thing about Dad's records, Mark said, leaning back in his chair, is that he kept everything. Every receipt, every letter, every random note. It was chaos. I had to reorganize the whole office before I could even start probate. My coffee had gone cold, but I kept my hands wrapped around the cup to stop them from shaking. That must have been overwhelming.
It was.
But someone had to do it. I spent weeks sorting through his desk, his filing cabinets, even that old chest in the basement. I had to decide what was important and what was just clutter. Before probate? I asked carefully. Well, yeah. How else would I know what to file? That was illegal. An executor cannot reorganize or remove documents before probate. Everything must be inventoried in its original state. But Mark did not seem to realize what he had just admitted. Did you have to throw much away? I asked. Some things. Old bills, duplicate records, letters that did not matter anymore. I kept everything important, obviously. My phone sat on the table between us, recording app hidden in my notes folder. Every word he said was being documented. I had researched state law carefully. Oregon is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. As long as one person in the conversation knows about the recording, it is legal. Mark kept talking. He told me about consolidating bank accounts and transferring assets and making decisions he thought Dad would have wanted. Each admission dug him deeper. 2 days later, I met with Vincent Torres, Dad's former business partner. They had run a small accounting firm together for 15 years before Dad retired. Vincent was 72 now, with silver hair and kind eyes that reminded me of my father. Your dad talked about you all the time, Vincent said as we sat in his living room. He was so proud of you becoming a nurse. He used to say you had the biggest heart of anyone he knew. My throat tightened. I miss him. He missed you too, especially near the end. He told me Mark was pushing him about finances. Wanted power of attorney, wanted to be added to bank accounts. Your dad refused. I set down my teacup carefully. Mark wanted power of attorney. Several times. Your dad did not trust him with it. He said Mark was too focused on money and not enough on people. He told me if anything happened to him, I should make sure you knew the truth. What truth? Vincent stood and walked to a bookshelf. He pulled down a worn envelope and handed it to me. He gave me this 6 months before he died. Said to give it to you if Mark tried anything shady. The envelope was sealed with red wax. My name was written across it in Dad's careful script. My hands trembled as I held it. There is something else, Vincent said. A safety deposit box. Your dad opened it about a year ago. Only you and I are listed as authorized. Mr. Brennan arranged for the bank to open Dad's safety deposit box. We met there on a gray Tuesday morning. The bank manager, a serious woman named Patricia Holmes, verified our identification and led us to a small private room. The box was larger than I expected. Patricia set it on the table and left us alone. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside were documents, photographs, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. Mr. Brennan picked up the first document, and his eyebrows rose. This is a trust agreement, dated 14 months ago. I took the papers he handed me. My father had created an irrevocable trust, transferring the house and most of his liquid assets into it. The trust named me as primary beneficiary with specific conditions. If Mark acted as executor in good faith, distributions would be split evenly. But if Mark engaged in fraud, concealment, or manipulation, he would be removed entirely and I would inherit everything. He knew, I whispered. He knew Mark would do this. Mr. Brennan nodded slowly. Your father was an accountant for 40 years. He understood how to protect assets and how to expose wrongdoing. This trust is airtight. Mark has been filing probate on assets your father no longer owned. Everything he has claimed is invalid. I picked up the envelope with my name. Inside was a letter in Dad's handwriting. My dearest Danielle, it began. I read the letter 3 times before I could speak. Dad's words painted a picture I did not want to see, but could not deny. In my final months, Mark began visiting more frequently. But his attention was not on my health. He asked repeatedly about my assets, my accounts, my plans. He pressured me to sign power of attorney papers. He suggested I simplify my estate by transferring everything to him. When I refused, he became cold, distant. I realized my son saw me as a bank, not a father. So, I took steps to protect what I wanted you to have. The locked drawer in my study contains evidence of Mark's attempts to manipulate me. Recorded conversations, forged signatures he did not know I discovered, documents showing his unauthorized access to my accounts. I kept everything because I knew someday you might need proof.
The drawer is yours, Danielle.
Everything in it is yours. But more than that, the truth is yours. I trust you to do what is right. I always have. Your loving father. Tears blurred my vision. Dad had known. He had seen through Mark's deception and quietly built a case against him. He had protected me even when I did not know I needed protection. The drawer, I said to Mr. Brennan. We need to get into that drawer. We will, he promised. But we need to do this carefully. Mark still has physical possession of the house and its contents. 3 days later, Mark called me. His voice was smooth and friendly, the tone of someone who thought they had already won. Hey, Danny. I have been thinking about our situation. This estate stuff is getting complicated. What if we settled everything privately? Just the two of us, no lawyers, no courts. I give you some cash, you sign off on the estate, and we both move on. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. He thought I was weak. He thought I would take whatever scraps he offered and disappear quietly. How much cash? I asked. 50,000. That is more than fair for your share of everything. $50,000 out of an estate worth at least 600,000, not including the house. He was offering me less than 10% and calling it generous. Can we meet to discuss it? I asked. Maybe your place, so we can talk privately?
Sure.
Tomorrow afternoon. 2 o'clock. I will be there, I said. Then I called Mr. Brennan. He is trying to buy me off. Perfect, Mr. Brennan said. Oregon law allows recorded conversations with one-party consent. Bring your phone. Get him talking. Get him to admit everything he has done. We will use his own words against him. I spent that night preparing. I charged my phone fully. I tested the recording app a dozen times. I wrote down questions that would make Mark feel safe enough to brag. Because that was his weakness. Mark always needed to be the smartest person in the room. And people who need to feel smart often say too much. Mark's house was exactly what I expected. Expensive furniture, modern art on the walls, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Everything carefully arranged to project success. I sat on his designer couch with my phone recording in my jacket pocket. So, Mark said, pouring himself scotch he did not offer to share, let us talk about settling this thing. I just want to understand what I am signing off on, I said carefully. The estate, Dad's belongings, all of it.
Right.
Well, here is the thing, Danny. When someone dies, their assets get distributed according to the will. Dad's will named me executor, which means I handle everything. What about that drawer with my initials? His jaw tightened slightly. That drawer does not matter. It is just old papers and photographs. Nothing valuable. Then why not let me have it? Because, Mark leaned forward, I need to keep things simple. If I start picking out individual items for you, other relatives will want stuff too. It becomes a mess. This way is cleaner. You get cash, I handle the estate, everyone is happy. But Dad specifically wanted me to have that drawer. Dad was sick, Mark said, his voice sharp. He was not thinking clearly at the end. He said a lot of things that did not make sense. As executor, I have to make practical decisions. There it was. Recorded. Mark admitting he was overriding Dad's specific wishes. What about all the medical bills? I asked. Did you handle those too? Mark's face changed. For just a second, his confident mask slipped. What about the medical bills? I was just wondering how you managed them. It must have been expensive. I handled it, he said quickly. I made sure Dad got the care he needed. But I have receipts showing I paid most of them. The room went very quiet. You kept receipts? I keep records of everything, I said. Bank statements, hospital bills, payment confirmations. All showing I covered Dad's medical expenses while you were in Seattle. Mark set down his glass. Those were reimbursements. I sent you money. No, you did not. Yes, I did. You just forgot. I pulled out my phone, no longer caring about being subtle. Should I check my bank records right now? Should we go through every transaction from the last 2 years? His face flushed red. You are being manipulative. I am asking questions. No, you're trying to make me look bad. You have always been jealous that Dad trusted me more. That is what this is really about. Did he trust you? I asked quietly. Is that why you had to hide things from probate? Is that why you will not let me see the drawer? Because Dad trusted you so much. Get out, Mark said, standing. This meeting is over. I will leave. But Mark, I am not signing anything. And I am not going away. I walked out with my phone still recording, capturing his angry muttering as the door slammed shut behind me. Mr. Brennan filed a formal petition with the court the next morning. The document was 23 pages long and detailed every discrepancy we had found. Missing assets, altered valuations, withheld items, unauthorized document reorganization, and recorded admissions of impropriety. The petition requested 3 things. First, immediate access to the locked drawer bearing my initials. Second, full forensic accounting of all estate assets. Third, removal of Mark as executor for breach of fiduciary duty. The response came within 48 hours. Mark's attorney, a slick-looking man named Preston Hale, filed an emergency motion to deny our petition. He claimed the drawer was empty. He said I was making false accusations. He argued I was a disgruntled family member trying to extort money. But the court was not convinced. Judge Patricia Mendoza reviewed our evidence and scheduled a hearing for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, she issued a temporary order. The locked drawer was to remain untouched. Mark could not enter Dad's study until the hearing. A court-appointed estate administrator would take possession of the house keys. Mark tried to delay. He claimed he needed access for essential estate business. He said the hearing was scheduled too quickly. He filed motion after motion, each one more desperate than the last. Our family watched in real time as Mark unraveled. Aunt Beverly called to ask what was happening. Uncle Lawrence stopped returning Mark's calls. My cousin Tyler sent me a text that said simply, I believe you. The day of the hearing arrived cold and gray. I wore my best dress and tried not to throw up from nerves. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Mark sat at one table with his attorney. I sat at another with Mr. Brennan. Between us, on the judge's desk, sat a small brass key. The estate administrator had retrieved it from Mark's possession under court order. Judge Mendoza looked at both of us over her reading glasses. This hearing concerns access to a specific piece of furniture in the deceased's home. A locked drawer bearing the initials DW. Mr. Hale, your client claims this drawer is empty and irrelevant. Miss Walsh, you claim it contains items specifically designated for you by your father. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Then there is a simple solution. We will open the drawer and see what is inside. Mark's face went pale. Preston Hale stood quickly. Your Honor, we object. This is an invasion of privacy. The contents of that drawer are personal family matters, not legal issues. The contents of that drawer are part of a probated estate, Judge Mendoza replied. They're very much legal issues. This court orders the drawer opened immediately in the presence of both parties and their attorneys. We will proceed to the property now. 30 minutes later, we stood in Dad's study. The room smelled like his cologne and old books. Mark looked physically ill as the estate administrator inserted the key into the lock. Everyone held their breath. The drawer slid open. Inside the drawer were 5 items carefully organized. A leather journal filled with Dad's handwriting. A small digital recorder. A flash drive. A folder of documents. And a sealed envelope addressed to me. The estate administrator, a stern woman named Patricia Chun, laid everything on Dad's desk. She picked up the digital recorder first and pressed play. Dad's voice filled the room, weak but clear. March 15th, Mark visited again today. He brought papers for me to sign. He said they were just updates to my will, but when I read them carefully, I saw they transferred my house into his name immediately. I refused. He became angry. Patricia pressed pause and looked at Mark. His face had gone from pale to gray. She pressed play again. April 3rd. I discovered Mark accessing my online banking without permission. He transferred $3,000 to his account. When I confronted him, he claimed it was reimbursement for expenses. I checked my records. There were no expenses. I changed all my passwords. More recordings followed. Months of evidence. Mark pressuring Dad to sign documents. Mark lying about medical costs. Mark attempting to access accounts he had no right to touch. The room was silent except for my father's recorded voice. Each entry was dated, time-stamped, carefully documented. When the recordings ended, Patricia picked up the folder. Inside were photographs of checks. Mark's forged signatures. Bank statements showing unauthorized transfers. The flash drive contained security camera footage of Mark entering Dad's study and going through his desk while Dad slept upstairs. Uncle Lawrence spoke first, his voice shaking. You tried to rob him. While he was dying, you tried to rob him. Aunt Beverly started crying. My cousin Bethany stared at Mark like she had never seen him before. Mark's wife, Karen, who had been standing quietly in the corner, made a small choking sound and rushed from the room. Mark's attorney looked at the evidence spread across the desk and his shoulders slumped. There was no defense for this. No way to spin it. The truth was recorded, documented, undeniable. Mark Walsh, Judge Mendoza said, her voice cold. You are hereby removed as executor of this estate, effective immediately. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation of potential fraud and elder abuse. Mark tried to speak. I can explain. You will not speak in this proceeding again, the judge interrupted. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you exercise it.
Mark looked at me then.
Really looked at me. I saw panic in his eyes and anger and something that might have been shame. Then he turned and walked out of the room. His footsteps echoed down the hallway. The front door opened and closed. His car started in the driveway. And just like that, the golden sun drove away. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then Aunt Beverly came to me and hugged me tight. I am so sorry, she whispered. We should have known. We should have protected you. Mark did not go quietly. 3 days after the hearing, his attorney filed a countersuit. The document accused me of manipulating Dad, planting evidence, and fabricating recordings. It claimed I had used my position as a nurse to control Dad's medications and influence his thinking. It painted me as a calculating predator who took advantage of a sick old man. The accusations were so outrageous, so completely backward, that I almost laughed. Almost. But Mark was not stupid. He knew his only chance was to flip the narrative completely. If he could make me look like the villain, maybe he could salvage something. The problem was the evidence. Dad had not just recorded Mark's behavior. He had documented everything with timestamps, external verification, and corroborating witnesses. Every recording on that digital device had a matching entry in his journal with details about what happened before and after. The security footage was from cameras Mark did not know existed. The forged signatures had been verified by 3 different handwriting experts Dad hired privately. My father had built an airtight case against his own son. And he had done it knowing Mark would try exactly this kind of desperate counterattack. The trial was scheduled for 6 months out. In the meantime, Patricia Chin took over as estate administrator. She launched a full forensic audit of every transaction Mark had made. What she found was worse than any of us expected. Patricia called me to her office on a Wednesday afternoon. She had spreadsheets covering her entire desk and an expression that made my stomach drop. Sit down, Danielle. I sat. I have completed my initial audit of your father's estate. What I found is significant. She turned her computer screen toward me. Highlighted in yellow were dozens of transactions spanning 3 years. Mark began accessing your father's accounts shortly after his cancer diagnosis. Small amounts at first. 200 here, 500 there. Nothing large enough to trigger bank alerts. How much total? Over the past 3 years, Mark transferred roughly $178,000 from your father's accounts to his own. The room spun. Nearly $200,000. But there is more, Patricia continued. Your father discovered most of this about 14 months ago. That is when he created the trust we found in the safety deposit box. She pulled up another document. It was Dad's trust agreement, but this time she highlighted a specific clause. This provision states that if Mark engaged in fraud or misconduct as executor, he forfeits any inheritance rights completely. Everything goes to you and designated charities. Your father knew what Mark was doing, and he prepared for it. Why did he not just report Mark to the police? Because, Patricia said gently, he hoped Mark would change. He hoped that seeing your father sick would wake him up. But it did not. It made him worse. The trial began on a Tuesday morning in October. The courtroom was bigger this time. Mark sat with Preston Hale and a team of 2 other attorneys. I sat with Mr. Brennan. Judge Mendoza presided, the same judge from before. She had requested the case, specifically. Patricia Chun testified first. She laid out the forensic audit in detail. Every unauthorized transfer, every forged signature, every instance of Mark accessing accounts without permission. She presented bank statements, time-stamped records, and expert analysis. Mark's attorneys tried to argue the transfers were gifts. Patricia calmly presented emails where Dad questioned the withdrawals. They tried to claim Dad gave Mark access willingly. Patricia played recordings where Dad explicitly denied permission. They tried to argue Dad was mentally incompetent. Patricia introduced medical evaluations from 3 different doctors stating Dad was sharp until his final weeks. The second day of trial, the prosecution played all of Dad's recordings. The courtroom listened to my father's weak voice documenting his son's betrayal. Several jurors looked at Mark with open disgust. On the 3rd day, Vincent Torres testified about Dad's concerns and the envelope he entrusted to him. Mr. Brennan presented the trust documents, showing Dad's clear intentions. Mark's attorneys had no counter, no explanation, no defense that held up against the mountain of evidence Dad had carefully compiled. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. We find the defendant's actions constitute fraud, elder abuse, and breach of fiduciary duty. The jury foreman's voice echoed through the courtroom. Mark sat frozen in his chair. Judge Mendoza removed her glasses. Mark Walsh, this court finds you have systematically stolen from your father, manipulated estate proceedings, and violated the trust placed in you as executor. You are hereby stripped of all inheritance rights. You are ordered to repay $178,000 in stolen funds plus interest. You are permanently barred from serving as executor or trustee in any capacity. Furthermore, criminal charges for elder fraud and financial exploitation are being filed by the district attorney. Mark's face crumbled. Karen had not attended the trial. She had filed for divorce the week before, taking their 2 children and moving back to her parents' house in California. His job had terminated him when the accusations became public. His friends had stopped returning calls. Everything he built his identity around had collapsed. The judge continued. The estate of Thomas Walsh will be distributed according to the trust agreement executed 14 months before his death. All assets will go to Danielle Walsh and designated charities per the deceased's explicit wishes.
Mark looked at me then.
His eyes were red. He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked away. 2 days later, he appeared at my apartment. I almost did not answer the door, but something made me open it. Mark stood in my doorway, looking 10 years older than he was. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair unwashed. I need to talk to you, he said.
I did not invite him in. We stood in the hallway.
What could you possibly have to say to me? I am sorry. The words came out broken. I am so sorry, Danny. I do not know what happened to me. I just kept thinking about money and status, and proving I was successful. Dad got sick, and all I could see was assets and numbers. I forgot he was a person. I forgot you were a person. Tears ran down his face. I lost everything. Karen, the kids, my job, my reputation. I have nothing left. I am declaring bankruptcy. I will be paying back that money for the rest of my life. I waited. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, just emptiness. I know you hate me, Mark continued. I know I do not deserve forgiveness. But I am asking anyway. I am begging.
Please help me.
Please tell the court you want them to reduce my penalties. Please. I looked at my brother. The golden son. The successful one. The favorite. Now broken and desperate. No, I said quietly. You made choices, Mark. You chose money over family. You chose lies over truth. You chose to hurt Dad when he was at his weakest. Those were your decisions. These are your consequences. Please, he whispered. I have nothing. And whose fault is that? I asked. Then I closed the door. I spent the next 6 months honoring Dad's wishes. The house was donated to a nonprofit that provided housing for families of cancer patients. $25,000 went to the hospital's oncology wing. Another $30,000 went to a scholarship fund for nursing students. I kept some. Enough to rebuild my depleted savings. Enough to take time off work and process everything that happened. Enough to start fresh. But mostly I worked on healing our family. Aunt Beverly and I had dinner every week. Uncle Lawrence helped me sort through Dad's belongings, sharing stories about their childhood. Cousin Bethany and I grew close in ways we never had been before. The family Mark tried to divide began knitting itself back together. I found Dad's favorite cardigan in his closet and kept it. Some nights I wrapped myself in it and cried. Not for Mark, but for Dad. For the father who loved me enough to protect me even after death. Who trusted me enough to handle the truth. Who knew I was strong enough to fight. I visited his grave every Sunday. I brought flowers and talked to him about my week. I told him about the scholarship we created in his name. About the families staying in his house. About justice finally being served. I miss you, I whispered one cold Sunday morning. But I understand now why you did what you did.
You taught me to stand up for myself.
You taught me that truth matters. You taught me I am worth fighting for. The last time I opened that drawer, I found one more thing tucked in the very back. A small folded piece of paper I had missed during the initial inventory. I unfolded it carefully. Dad's handwriting was clear and strong, written before the shaking started. Danielle, if you are reading this, then everything I feared came true. Mark tried to take what was rightfully yours. He chose greed over family. I am sorry you had to fight this battle. But I am not sorry I prepared you for it. The drawer was never about money or inheritance. It was about truth. About having proof when the world tried to tell you that you were wrong. About standing up for yourself when everyone else stood silent. You are my greatest achievement, Danny. Not because of grades or career or accomplishments, but because of who you are inside.
Kind. Honest. Strong.
Everything I hoped you would become. Mark will fade into irrelevance. His choices will define his legacy. But you, my dear daughter, will shine. You will heal. You will help others. You will build a life of meaning and purpose. And you will know, always, that your father trusted you most. Love always, Dad. I folded the note carefully and placed it back in the drawer. Then I locked it and put the key on a chain around my neck. The drawer sits in my apartment now, a reminder of everything I survived. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty, if I regret what happened to Mark. I tell them the truth. I won not through revenge, but through justice. Through standing up for myself and honoring my father's legacy. Mark chose his path. I simply refused to let him drag me down it. And in the end, that made all the difference.